When famous little person Lavinia Warren made appearances holding a large infant, everyone assumed she was the mother. They were so wrong, and the truth would have broken them. Lavinia Warren would go on to become one of the most famous little people on earth. As a baby, she tipped the scales at a healthy 6 pounds. Various sources say that she stopped growing either as a toddler or when she was 10 years old. We'll likely never know those early details, but we certainly know more about her condition today than people did back then. Warren suffered from proportional dwarfism, a pituitary gland issue. She had numerous siblings growing up, but only one who could empathise with her condition. Her younger sister Minnie also had proportional dwarfism, and the two formed a special bond. Warren never allowed her dwarfism to hold her back. At just 16, she became a school teacher. Standing at just 32 inches in height, however, it would have been easy to mistake her for one of her students. For proportional dwarves in 19th century America, work was hard to come by, so when one of Warren's cousins who owned a showboat in Mississippi offered her an opportunity, she knew she couldn't pass it up. The cousin convinced her to spend one summer on his boat, but there was a catch. She would be part of his Museum of Living Wonders. Warren's cousin saw the potential in turning her medical condition and tiny stature into big stacks of cold hard cash. He marketed her as the Lilliputian Queen to paying guests on his showboat. Warren danced, sang show tunes, and chatted with the guests who looked on in wonder. Warren found her tribe in her cousin's Museum of Living Wonders and stood out as the star performer. With the money rolling in, she didn't want to go back to her normal life and asked her cousin if she could stay on. Pretty soon, her reputation spread far and wide, and that's when she met one of the most powerful men in the business. In 1862, when she was 21 years old, Warren entered the big leagues. After just a few years on her cousin's boat, she attracted the attention of the famous impresario P.T. Barnum. Barnum believed that Warren, with her talent for singing, dancing, and eloquence, would be a perfect addition to his own museum. Barnum already had other proportional dwarves on his books, namely two very eligible bachelors, George Washington Morrison Nutt, aka Commodore Nutt, and General Tom Thumb, real name Charles Sherwood Stratton. When Warren agreed to join Barnum's American Museum, she became part of a tiny but tumultuous love triangle. Barnum's New York-based museum turned out to be the perfect place for Warren to showcase her uniqueness. She became an immediate sensation, earning as much as $3,000 every day for the museum. But she wanted someone to share that success with. Partly because of her youthful looks, Barnum paired Warren up with the teenage Commodore Nutt. Even though he was 7 years younger, he became completely entranced the first time he laid eyes on her. Warren was less enthusiastic about her show partner. Despite his obvious affection for her, Warren never considered Commodore Nutt to be anything more than a nice little boy. However, for the sake of appearances, Barnum wanted Warren and Nutt to spark up a real romance. It became clear to Barnum that despite his efforts at playing matchmaker, Warren had no interest in Commodore Nutt. That's when Barnum introduced Warren to his most famous little performer, General Tom Thumb. Lavinia Warren and General Thumb were madly in love, and it was plain for everyone to see. But while everyone else celebrated the relationship between the two famous little people, one person fumed. Commodore Nutt refused to accept that he had lost out on Warren's affections and started a fistfight with Thumb backstage during one of their shows. Unfortunately, there's no footage of that because film cameras hadn't been invented yet, but I still really looked. In a last-ditch effort to win over Warren's affections, Commodore Nutt attempted to crash one of her dates with General Thumb. Sadly, he was too late. General Thumb had just proposed to Warren, and she had said yes. With civil conflict ravaging most of the country, the news of Warren and Thumb's pending nuptials gave the entire country something to celebrate. The big day came on February 10th, 1863. In order to appease the eager public, Warren agreed to have an open wedding ceremony so that anyone could attend. And everyone who was anyone did. Warren walked down the aisle at Grace Episcopal Church in front of more than 2,000 guests, including many of America's 19th century A-list celebrities. Whereas she left the ceremony open to the public, Warren allowed Barnum to charge guests a whopping $75 to attend the reception. That would be about $2,000 today. Despite the hefty admittance fee, they still expected their guests to shower them with gifts. Warren and her new husband greeted their high-paying reception attendees perched upon a grand piano. From their vantage point, they had a spectacular view of all their devoted fans. The New York Times recorded the extravagant gifts, including jewellery from Tiffany's, a miniature billiards table, and most impressively, a carriage from Queen Victoria. The Times reported the next day that during the service, Commodore Nutt appeared sick with jealousy. In all likelihood, however, the Times story was idle gossip, as Nutt actually served in the wedding as Thumb's groomsman. Cute! For promotional purposes, Barnum had taken photographs of Commodore Nutt proposing to Warren's sister, Minnie, around the time of Warren's big wedding. The photographs led to speculation that the love triangle had expanded to a love square. In her autobiography published in the New York Tribune, she dispelled the notion that Commodore Nutt had gone from being her admirer to her brother-in-law. She chalked the whole misunderstanding up to the fact that the four little people had a close, friendly relationship, but that there was nothing romantic between Nutt and her sister. Following their lavish wedding, Warren and Thumb embarked on a whirlwind, worldwide honeymoon. One of their first stops, however, was right at home. Wanting to further distract the nation from the conflict tearing the country apart, then President Abraham Lincoln invited the celebrity couple to the White House. When Warren arrived at the White House, she received a warmer welcome than she was comfortable with. Without warning, President Lincoln, who was 6'4", leaned in and kissed Warren on the cheek. He further quipped, "Sometimes God likes to do funny things, and here you have the long and the short of it." Warren had no qualms telling her friends after the encounter that she considered Lincoln to be quite rude. 1 year after their wedding and tour, Warren returned to New York and Barnum's American Museum. Much to everyone's surprise, however, she and General Thumb didn't return from their travels empty-handed. Warren and Thumb posed for pictures and public appearances carrying a mysteriously large baby. The public interest in this latest little addition to Warren's family sent the public into a frenzy. In fact, the public was so excited that no one stopped to ask whether or not the baby actually belonged to them. As it turns out, the baby was not, in fact, Warren's. In a stroke of marketing genius, Barnum had borrowed the baby from an orphanage. For the first few months, Warren and Barnum pulled off their little charade perfectly. However, as the months passed, Warren pointed out that the baby was growing too much for audiences to believe that it was hers. So, she came up with a brilliant idea of her own. Before embarking on a cross-country tour, Warren hatched a bold, if a little Machiavellian plan. She proposed dispatching a representative to each town ahead of time. They'd be tasked with discreetly choosing an infant from the local orphanage to use as a prop during their show. After a day of basking in the limelight alongside Warren, they would return the selected baby safe and sound. Well, as safe and sound as an orphanage in the 19th century could be. Warren's plan worked better than even she could have expected. It ensured that their travelling troupe had a steady supply of small babies. They were able to maintain appearances while also alleviating the hassle of having a child in tow throughout their travels. But there is another, darker theory as to where these mystery babies came from. Wait, darker than this? One theory claims that Warren and Thumb did have a child of their own. Unlike Warren and Thumb, however, the alleged baby lacked the natural charm and photogenicity to become a star. As such, This theory suggests that they simply replaced their own baby in the photos with cuter little cherubs. Imagine being a baby that's too ugly for a circus. Another source claimed that the baby in Warren's early photographs was in fact her own. However, they replaced the baby after a few years, not because she wasn't cute enough, but because she wasn't, well, alive enough. Allegedly, Warren's and Thumb's only child, named Minnie after Warren's sister, died at the tender age of 2. There is some credit to this theory. In General Tom Thumb's obituary in the New York Times, it clearly states that Warren and Thumb had a child. The alleged baby, once again, passed away at just 2 years of age. However, various sources give various dates for the birth and untimely demise of Warren's mystery baby. Despite her love for children, Warren lived in constant fear of having any of her own. Because of her condition, she feared that childbirth would be too much for her tiny physique to bear, especially if she gave birth to a normal-sized baby. In a devastating blow, her sister Minnie proved her theory about the dangers of childbirth to be right. Warren's younger sister Minnie had also married another little person in Barnum's employ. No, not the forever lovelorn Commodore Nutt, but a Major Edward Newell. Minnie became pregnant with Newell's baby and managed to carry to term. Giving birth to a full-size baby, however, proved to be too much, and she and the baby died shortly after the ordeal. Devastated, Warren held her sister in her arms as she drew her final breaths. In 1883, Warren and Thumb found themselves at the Newhall House Hotel in Milwaukee. The local fire department described the hotel as a tinderbox where tragedy was just waiting to catch a spark. It was almost a fateful morning for the little performers when, at approximately 4 a.m, the building became engulfed in flames. The Newhall House Hotel quickly became, as one eyewitness described it, a flaming straw stack. As the flames consumed the famous luxury hotel, Warren and Thumb found themselves trapped on the 6th floor. Dozens of other guests made the painful decision of jumping to their deaths. However, Warren's small stature saved her life. Being little people once again paid off for Warren and Thumb. With the tiny couple tucked beneath one arm and a firm grasp on his ladder with the other, a single firefighter carried both Warren and Thumb down to safety. It was a feat that wouldn't have been possible with 2 fully grown adults. Warren and Thumb survived the inferno at the Newhall House Hotel. As many as 90 other guests, including an associate of theirs, hadn't been so lucky. But the event took its toll on their health all the same. Writing in her memoirs, Warren stated, "The General never recovered from the shock of that terrible ordeal. Only months later, Thumb died from a sudden stroke." His sudden passing left Warren crestfallen. In her autobiography, she claimed that she had wanted to retire following Thumb's death, and that Barnum had coaxed her back into work. It's likelier, however, that Warren returned to performing in order to maintain her lavish lifestyle. But she would need a new sidekick. Don't worry, it's not him. A few years after Thumb's passing, Warren married Count Primo Magri, an Italian little person with a similar history of performing. Even though he was a few inches shorter than Warren's late husband, he had a higher rank. Allegedly, Pope Pius IX had given Magri the title Count, making him more or less actual royalty and making her, technically, a real countess. Warren continued performing with Count Primo Magri into the early 1900s. She even starred in a silent film alongside him, The Lilliputians' Courtship. Eventually, however, as the public learned more about the science of dwarfism, they lost interest in Warren and performers like her. Eventually, she retired to her hometown of Middleborough, Massachusetts, and opened up an ice cream shop. Warren died on November 25, 1919, at the age of 78. As she requested, she was buried next to Thumb, her first husband and true love. However, Thumb's tombstone was a massive obelisk topped with a life-size, albeit still small, statue of him. Despite her massive stardom and miniature stature, Warren only has a simple gravestone that reads, "His wife." Lavinia Warren's dwarfism made her rich and famous, and it also caused everyone to regard her as either a child or an attraction. But she never regretted her decision to join Barnum and cash in on her small stature. She said, "When asked if I don't get tired of this public life, I am wont to answer that in a sense, I belong to the public." If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.